Hi there. Today we're going to look at how to connect to the Neon serverless Postgres database from .NET 8. If you haven't heard of Neon, that's okay. We're going to do a quick overview before jumping into the code. We're not going to be writing code in this video, but instead I have prepared a solution which is ready to run. I will walk through the ready code, build it, run it, and then look at Neon dashboard to see what's going on. Ready? Let's go. Alrighty, here is Neon. The URL is neon.tech. It's essentially a serverless database, like a managed hosted database that you don't have to worry about backups or branching or anything like that. It's really quite neat. They have auto scaling, branching, so you can have a development database, a production database, a staging database. Pretty cool. Now, what is not cool is that they do not have a quick start for .NET. They have a quick start for Remix or Symfony or Ruby on Rails. Well, Rails. But they do not have one for .NET. I mean, even the language quick starts, right? Go, JavaScript, obviously, Python, Rust, right? But no .NET. So we're going to remedy that in this video. And we're going to connect to Neon through .NET. NPG SQL, I believe, is the package that we're going to use. So let's jump into Visual Studio and see how it's done. All right, here we are in Visual Studio. This is just a console application. I'm not going to jump through the hoops of creating a new application. I think that's pretty straightforward. So I already created one and I added a few classes required to connect to the database. So we're going to do kind of a live code review. I'm going to show you what the code is and just talk about it. So let's start at the top by looking at the packages that I pulled in. Now, we could do manage Nuget packages, but I'm just going to show you the project file and just briefly talk about what we got in here. And what we have is Dapper, the preferred ORM, I would say. We also have NPG SQL, that is for connecting to Postgres. And then we have 4 packages for pulling in configuration. Now, we don't actually need environment variables, but if we want to host this somewhere, then we're probably going to need it. So I just pulled it in anyway. Who knows? Maybe you might host it in a Railway or something as a cron job, right? So this is what the project file looks like. Essentially 3 different things: configuration, Dapper, and an NPG SQL. All right, that is the project file. We also have app settings.json. And in here, I defined a Neon connection node with some properties: server, database, username, and password. Just what you need to connect to a database, right? Pretty straightforward. Nothing out of the ordinary here. And this app settings.json binds to this Neon config class, which has exactly the same properties, Neon config. And where does it bind, you ask? Well, in program.cs, we have the iConfiguration at the very top, in which we pull in app settings.json. We then define a new Neon config class, and then we bind to it the Neon connection node section, I guess it's called, from within app settings.json. So that is how we get the database config into our application. Once we have the config, we want to create a new connection. And that is where the context comes into play. I like to call them contexts. I think when I was first starting with .NET, like 20 years ago, well, not 20 years ago, whenever EF came out, contexts were like the thing you had to learn, right? So when you were learning Entity Framework, you were learning about contexts, DB context, right? So I think that kind of stuck with me, and now I create a context everywhere if I want to connect to a database, whether it's, Postgres or Redis or something else. I'm just always creating contexts Maybe it's a problem that I have. Anyway, here's Neon context. And that is essentially a new open object here, and I pass in the config from above. And what does that look like? Well, it's a class that has a few things in it. First, let's make this a little bit bigger. We have, as you can see here in program.cs, we call init on it, right? So what does init do? Well, it calls init database and create tables, right? So what init database does, just the first thing that runs, is it creates a connection, which we have here. So this uses the npg-sql Nuget package to create a new connection, which is just newing up an object with a connection string, right? Once we have the connection, we create a query. First query we need to create is to pull the count of databases from Postgres, where the name of the database is the name of the database that we want to create. And that comes out of config. So once we execute this query, we see that if we got no databases with that name, we want to create it. And that's it. Now, if we execute this and it already exists, then we don't need to worry about initiating a database because, well, we have a connection and we can just start creating things in it. So, but if not, then we do create a database. So that's going to be step number 1. Now, step number 2 is to create the tables. And for that, we go down here. So this is just another composite method that has 2 smaller methods in it: init categories and init products. So now that we either have created a database or the database already existed, we can create the tables. So first we want to create the categories, and then we want to create the products. And that's because products has a foreign key to categories. So you want to create them in order. So if init categories, and basically what we're doing here is we're, again, newing up a connection, writing the query, and then executing said query. This query is like fairly straightforward, simple SQL for creating a database. So if the table doesn't exist, table being categories, we create it with these properties. And it's the same for products. If the table products does not exist, go ahead and create it with these properties, these columns rather. So that's it. That is the context, and honestly, that is the solution. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and run this and switch over to Neon dashboard and see what that looks like. And this is Neon, specifically the Neon dashboard. Now they do have a lot of other sections that we're not going to go into. What we're interested in is the tables section. So let's take a look here. Now you can see we have a demo project, and inside that project we have the demo database. This is the database that we've defined inside our app settings.json, but we currently have no tables. So what we're going to do is we're going to run our application, and we're going to come back here and see if the tables are created. Back in Visual Studio, we are ready to run this application. So let's just play. And as you can see here, it builds and runs, and it's done. And really the only thing that we've done here is just run the application. There's no console logging or anything. So this is it. Now let's go back to Neon and see if our tables are created. All right, back in Neon, let's do a quick refresh. And here we are, categories and products. You can see here the columns, ID, name, category ID, description, and so on. And for categories, we have ID, name, description, created on. So the tables were successfully created, and we've successfully connected to Neon from .NET. So there you go. That's it. Now you can also create new methods inside Visual Studio to add new products, add new categories, and you can create all of that within the context, and you're good to go with .NET. Hope that was useful. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care.